Welcome to This Day in His Story, created by American Heritage Worldwide. A reminder that every day holds something new to learn. Did you know that in 1829, the Quorum of the 12 Apostles were called by the Lord to cross the ocean and preach the restored gospel in Great Britain, despite persecution, poverty, and their personal hardships? Learn that many were weakened by malaria, leaving behind sick wives, newborn children, and families with very little food or money. Discover how, trusting in the Lord's promises, they were able to press forward in faith, shouting, "Hurrah, hurrah for Israel." Imagine lying in the dirt, right next to a muddy river. You're shaking so violently from a fever that you can't even stand up.
Oh, and you've just left your starving, equally sick wife behind in this makeshift cabin?
Exactly. You have no money, no supplies, and the journey ahead requires crossing thousands of miles of hostile frontier and then, an ocean.
Right. And you are doing all of this purely because you received a mandate from heaven.
It sounds impossible, right? But today we are looking at a group of men who did exactly that. And somehow, against every mathematical and biological law of survival, they changed history.
They really did.
Welcome to today's deep dive. We have this staggering compilation of historical records, personal journals, and first-hand accounts detailing the 1839 mission of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles to Great Britain. So, okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah, the records we're looking at today, they really force us to reevaluate everything we think we know about human endurance. The core theme for you, the listener, is understanding how monumental tasks are actually achieved. We are looking at how history is forged, not when conditions are ideal, but when, every single variable in your life is actively collapsing around you.
And before we can even conceptualize their journey across the Atlantic Ocean, we have to examine the terrifying roadblocks right at the starting line.
The context is everything here.
Right. So the timeline begins a year prior, in July of 1838. A revelation recorded in Section 118 of the Doctrine and Covenants, verse 4, issued a very specific, undeniable charge to the apostles.
To go over the great waters.
Yes. Quote, "To go over the great waters, and there promulgate my gospel, the fullness thereof, and bear record of my name."
Now, the initial departure date was set for April 26, 1839. But to understand the gravity of this historical account, we really have to look at the violent reality on the ground at that time.
Because it wasn't just a simple matter of packing their bags.
Not at all. Between the time that command was given and their scheduled departure, the Latter-day Saints experienced the Missouri expulsion. They were subjected to a literal state-sponsored extermination order.
And, that is a detail that is so easy to gloss over as just history. But let's be incredibly clear about what that actually means.
That's horrific.
It is. A sitting governor authorized the military to drive an entire civilian population from the state or kill them. These people were violently stripped of their farms, their winter stores, their livestock.
And they were driven out into the freezing winter as destitute refugees.
Just left with nothing.
Exactly. They ultimately cross the Mississippi River and find this tenuous sanctuary in Illinois. They settle in a place they would eventually call Nauvoo.
But it wasn't much of a sanctuary at first, was it?
No, it was originally called Commerce, and it was essentially a swamp. I mean, you have a community that is completely traumatized.
Right.
They have no capital, no infrastructure, and they are physically depleted from a brutal winter exodus.
And as if being violently evicted and rendered homeless wasn't enough, the swampy conditions of their new home bring about a massive malaria epidemic.
Yeah, they called it the ague back then.
The ague. And it swept through the entire population, including the leadership. Everyone was getting sick.
To really appreciate the stakes, we need to understand what the ague actually does to the human body.
Break that down for us.
Well, malaria is caused by a parasite that destroys red blood cells. It triggers this violent, cyclical, biological response.
Which means it just keeps coming back in waves, right?
Yes. You experience chills so severe that your teeth chatter and your bones ache. And that is followed immediately by a burning, delirious fever.
Oh, wow.
And then, after the fever breaks, you get this profound, paralyzing exhaustion. It entirely depletes your body's energy reserves.
So think about this. You have a group of leaders tasked with launching a massive global mission. But it's like a commanding officer ordering a military unit to march into a blizzard to take a foreign continent.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah. Except, the unit has just had their homes burned down, their supply lines are cut, and every single soldier is suffering from a life-threatening, incapacitating fever.
It's absurd when you look at it purely logistically.
Right. So logically, wouldn't any normal group just postpone the mission? Wouldn't you appeal to heaven and say, we need a year to recover, build a war chest, and secure our families before we cross the Atlantic?
The survival instinct alone would dictate postponement, absolutely. Yet the historical records show a completely different paradigm here.
What did they do?
On July 22, 1839, the apostles held a meeting and passed a formal resolution. They recorded that they were determined to fulfill their mission to England, quote, sick or not.
Sick or not.
Yeah.
Man, that is a terrifying commitment when you are actively battling malaria.
And it becomes even more profound a couple of weeks later. On Sunday, August 4, it was a day of fasting and prayer.
Okay.
The prophet Joseph Smith renewed his instruction to them. He told them to go forth without purse or scrip, according to the revelations of Jesus Christ.
Wait, let's define that for the listener really quick. Without purse or scrip means setting out with a zero financial backing, right?
Zero. No bank drafts, no luggage full of provisions, no emergency fund, nothing.
It is the ultimate test of faith. I mean, Joseph Smith was highlighting the absolute priority of the divine mandate over their physical or financial circumstances.
Exactly. The Lord had commanded it. And so the physical reality of their illness and their extreme poverty was entirely secondary to the spiritual reality of their duty.
But it's one thing to sit in a council meeting, feel the Spirit, and vote to go sick or not.
Right.
How does a human being actually force their failing body to leave a starving spouse? That determination translated into some of the most brutal individual departures in recorded history.
It really did. We see the agonizing reality of this on August 8, 1839.
The Wilford Woodruff story.
Yes. The journal entries surrounding Wilford Woodruff's departure on this day are simply staggering.
So Wilford Woodruff is in the thick of this malaria epidemic. He writes that early on the morning of August 8th, he arose from what he calls his bed of sickness.
Barely able to stand, I'm sure.
Exactly. He manages to get up, walks over to his wife, Phoebe, who is also desperately sick, and he gives her a blessing, and then he just walks out the door.
He leaves.
He literally writes that he left the embrace of his companion, leaving her almost without food or the necessaries of life.
We really have to pause and deeply recognize Phoebe Woodruff's immense fortitude here.
Oh, absolutely. She's incredible.
Because the frontier in 1839 had no social safety net. There were no community pantries, and her immediate neighbors were just as sick and destitute as she was.
She was entirely on her own.
Yet Wilford notes that she suffered his departure with the fortitude that becomes a saint. She realizes the crushing responsibilities resting upon her husband.
And she sustains that divine call even while facing potential starvation. Her conviction is every bit as critical as his.
Without a doubt.
So, Wilford Woodruff, entirely feeble, manages to make his way down to the banks of the Mississippi River. Brigham Young, who is also suffering from the ague, takes him in a canoe and physically paddles him across the river.
2 men with severe malaria paddling a canoe.
Yeah. And when Woodruff reaches the other side, his biological reserves are just completely gone. He collapses onto the ground by the post office.
He can't go any further.
He finds a piece of sole leather, just a thick, raw scrap of animal hide used by cobblers for the bottoms of shoes, and he lays down on it in the dirt because he does not have the strength to stand or walk.
He has hit the absolute limit of his physiology. His body is shutting down.
And at that exact moment, Joseph Smith happens to come walking along. He looks down at Woodruff, who is lying on this miserable piece of leather in the dirt.
What a scene.
Joseph says, "Well, Brother Woodruff, you have started upon your mission." And I love Woodruff's response. With this incredibly dark, almost humorous honesty, he replies, "Yes, but I feel and look more like a subject for the dissecting room than a missionary."
It's so visceral. But what's fascinating here is how Joseph Smith responds to that statement.
Right.
In any standard leadership context, you would expect sympathy. A leader would offer him a bed or a hot meal, or at the very least suggest he wait a few days until his fever breaks before trying to walk across the country.
But Joseph doesn't do that at all. He doesn't offer a single word of sympathy or compromise.
No.
He looks down at a man who looks like a corpse and says, "What did you say that for? Get up and go along. All will be right with you."
It is an incredible paradigm-shifting leadership moment. There is no coddling. There is only the absolute factual certainty that the divine command will carry him through.
He just states it as a fact.
Yes. Joseph Smith knows as a literal, undeniable fact that God has called Wilford Woodruff to England. Therefore, the sickness is entirely irrelevant.
Why?
Biological limitations are completely overridden by faith and prophetic mandate. Joseph is essentially telling him, your body is telling you that you are dying, but your mission has already been decreed by heaven. The decree overrides your biology, so get up.
And Woodruff does. He gets up and he goes along.
It defies logic.
It really does. But if Woodruff's departure tested the absolute limits of physical endurance, what Brigham Young and Heber C. Kimball experienced a month later pushes the absolute boundaries of emotional endurance.
Oh, the September departures. By mid-September, the situation in Nauvoo had not improved at all. If anything, the collateral damage of the epidemic had compounded.
Brigham Young had been preparing to leave around September 14th. His wife, Mary Ann, has literally just given birth to a daughter.
Think about that timing.
Brigham himself is so sick with malaria that he cannot even walk 500 feet to the river without someone holding him up. 3 days later, Mary Ann, who again just had a baby and is dealing with postpartum recovery in a frontier swamp, crosses the river to care for her husband.
She goes to the home of Heber C. Kimball. And when she arrives, the Kimball home, the sea she walks into is one of absolute devastation.
Describe that for us, because it's hard to even picture.
Every single adult in the Kimball household is bedridden. The fever has paralyzed the entire family.
And this detail in the source material absolutely floored me. The only person in that entire house who is healthy enough to function is a 4-year-old boy.
Crowley Kimball.
Right. A wooden bucket full of water weighs 15 to 20 pounds. This 4-year-old child is the only one capable of hauling water from the well to try and keep the dying adults inside hydrated.
It paints such a vivid, excruciating picture of the sheer desperation of their circumstances. They are completely incapacitated. The physical environment is entirely unforgiving.
On September 18, Brigham Young and Heber C. Kimball decide it is time to leave.
Even though they're still so sick they cannot sit upright.
Exactly. They have to be physically lifted and laid down in the back of a wagon. As the wagon begins to pull away from the house, Elder Kimball later recorded the agony he was feeling.
I can only imagine.
He wrote that it seemed as though his innermost parts would melt within him. He was leaving his family in what he described as almost in the arms of death. The emotional agony was suffocating.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we see a profound psychological breaking point here.
Yeah.
Leaving your starving, desperately ill family, relying on a 4-year-old to bring them water, knowing you might never see them alive again, all while you yourself are lying sick in the back of a wagon. It defies human comprehension.
It really does. But he reaches a point where he cannot endure it passively. He asks the teamster to stop the wagon.
He needs to do something.
Yeah, he turns to Brigham Young and says, "This is pretty tough, isn't it? Let's rise up and give them a cheer."
Amazing.
So these two terribly sick men struggle to their feet in the back of this wagon. They swing their hats 3 times over their heads and they shout at the top of their lungs, "Hurrah! Hurrah for Israel!"
The profound psychology of this moment is astonishing.
How so?
Well, true sacrifice here isn't just about enduring suffering with gritted teeth. It is about the intentional, forceful manufacturing of triumph and joy in the very face of death.
They refuse to be victims.
Exactly. They're refusing to let the despair of their physical reality dictate the narrative of their mission.
And it works. Because while Kimball hears the shouting, she manages to rise from her sickbed and she comes to the door. She leans against the frame and she actually has a smile on her face.
A moment of light in all that darkness.
Violet Kimball and Mary Ann Young cry out to their husbands, "Goodbye, God bless you."
That cheer wasn't for the men in the wagon. It was a deliberate gift to their wives. It was a transfer of spiritual power.
Oh, I love that.
They were signaling to their families, we are going in the name of the Lord, and victory is assured no matter how catastrophic it looks right now. It is a manifestation of absolute, unbreakable conviction.
And making that impossible departure from Nauvoo was only step 1.
Right, they still had to get to England.
The actual journey east across the United States proved just as deadly. By the time they reached Indiana, John Taylor became deathly ill and had to be left behind.
Though, remarkably, he miraculously recovered and reunited with the group in New York later.
Right, but here's where it gets really interesting. I want to look at the literal math problem of this stagecoach journey.
Okay, let's look at the numbers.
Going without purse or scrip meant they were relying entirely on the provisions the Lord would supply along the way. And the numbers recorded in their histories are very precise.
Very precise.
Wait, let me play devil's advocate here for a second. When we look at historical records from the 1830s, couldn't this just be, sloppy frontier bookkeeping?
People might assume that, sure.
Right, like maybe they took some odd jobs along the way, or maybe they just lost track of what they spent versus what they had. How do we know there is a genuine mathematical anomaly here?
That is a crucial question, but we have to understand the rigorous nature of 19th century ledgers, particularly among these men.
They were detail-oriented.
Extremely.
Yeah.
These were not men prone to exaggeration. They were keeping meticulous financial accounts of every donation and every expense. They knew exactly what they had.
Okay, so what did they have?
The historical record shows they started this leg of the journey with a total of $13.50 in donations. That was the entirety of their capital.
$13.50. But the stagecoach routes across those states were incredibly expensive. By the time they reached their destination on the East Coast to catch the ship, their ledgers calculated that they had spent more than $87 on coach fares alone.
So you have $13.50 going into an $87 expense. The math simply does not work. There is no accounting error that bridges a gap like that.
So how is it resolved in the text? Because the historical record provides a factual, literal answer.
It does.
At one point, when they needed to pay the fine for the next stagecoach ride, Brigham Young reached into his trunk and he found the exact amount of money needed for the fare.
Just sitting there in the trunk.
Yes. The brethren recorded that this additional money was provided by some unseen agent from the heavenly world to forward the promulgation of the gospel.
The literal reality of these miracles is an undeniable fact of their journey. Money appearing in a trunk from a heavenly source. Instantaneous healings from deadly diseases. These events actually happened.
It's astounding.
And this connects directly back to a spiritual promise that the Lord had made to them 2 years earlier in 1837.
You mean Doctrine and Covenants, section 112?
Exactly. Verse 21. It reads, "Whosoever ye shall send in my name by the voice of your brethren, the 12, duly recommended and authorized by you, shall have power to open the door of my kingdom unto any nation whithersoever ye shall send them."
Power to open the door.
Yes. This raises an important question. Where does that kind of power come from? The immense, sweeping success they eventually found in Great Britain wasn't a coincidence.
Right. They baptized thousands of people.
They completely transformed the trajectory of the entire church. And the people of the British Isles were ready to receive the message of the Restoration precisely because these specific messengers had been proven.
They had been tested.
They had been preserved through literal fire. They carried a spiritual power and authority that can only be forged in the furnace of total sacrifice.
It makes complete sense. When you show up to preach the gospel after leaving your dying family in the hands of a 4-year-old, surviving malaria, sleeping on a piece of sole leather, and having heavenly agents literally put stagecoach fare in your luggage.
You're a changed person.
Exactly. You aren't just reciting a nice theological message. You are speaking with the absolute authority of someone who knows, as a matter of undeniable fact, that God is directing the work.
Their extreme trials were not obstacles to their mission. Their trials were the very things that forged the unshakable foundations necessary to accomplish it.
Wow.
If they had waited for good weather, if they had waited for perfect health and a fully funded bank account, they wouldn't have possessed the spiritual power required to open the door to that nation.
So what does this all mean for us today? When we look at this awe-inspiring reality from our history, it turns a very pointed question back on you, the listener.
The source material asks it directly.
It does. What kind of sacrifices do you make to live your beliefs and share them with others?
It forces us to examine our own willingness to move forward when conditions are less than ideal. We rarely face the extremes of 1839 Nauvoo, but we all face moments where duty requires us to act despite inconvenience.
Or despite fear or personal cost.
Exactly. We all have moments where we want to wait for the storm to pass before we step out the door.
And I want to leave you with a final lingering thought about Wilford Woodruff lying on that piece of sole leather by the post office.
Such a powerful image.
We tend to think of our lowest physical or emotional points as signs that we should stop, or that we've taken a wrong turn. We think rock bottom is the universe telling us to give up.
Right.
But think about this. What if the very act of leaving behind his lowest physical point, the sickness, the extreme poverty, that miserable scrap of leather in the dirt, was the exact necessary catalyst required to change an entire nation across the ocean?
That changes everything.
What if the most insurmountable roadblocks in your life right now aren't meant to stop you? What if they are the required training ground for your greatest mission?
It completely reframes how we view adversity. The obstacle isn't in the way. The obstacle is the way.
So next time you are facing a massive storm and you are tempted to wait for clear skies, remember the wagon cheer.
Remember the sole leather.
Remember the stagecoach fare. Sometimes you just have to get up and go along. Until next time, keep diving deep. Thank you for joining us for this day in His story. May the lessons of yesterday inspire you to see God's hand today and to play your part in His story now. For more faith-based learning, visit ahsworldwide.org, the homeschool for faith and family.